was a celebrity who did horrible stuff when they were alive, but are praised like saints now that they're dead. Story 1. Steve Jobs. Everyone only remembers him as the guy who created and then saved Apple and invented the iPhone. People don't remember how he over his best friend, knocked up his girlfriend and left her as soon as he found out she was pregnant, refused to give the mother of his first child any money, refused to show any outward affection to his daughter, and although this one is a bit milder in scale, refused to take showers and would put his bare feet up on the conference table. Oh, also, he refused cancer treatment in favor of New Age healing until it was too late, and then he spent a buttload of money to leapfrog his name on the organ donor list. Story 2. Not dead, but Oprah's legacy will definitely be more complicated. She contributed to the hysteria surrounding the satanic panic. She's the reason Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil became famous.
Story 3. Picasso Hugh Hefner.
Hefner's former male and female employees and partners made claims of systematic misconduct and manipulation, recreational and manipulative drug use, peer pressure, sextortion, blackmail, rape, forced and violent assault without consent while victims were in a state of drug-induced stupor or unconsciousness, spying, videotaping without consent, and illegal with minors by Hefner and his celebrity friends and guests at the mansion and other locations. Wiki surprised nobody said Hitchcock. Guy was a total abusive perv, genius who made absolutely terrific films and expanded the very vocabulary of visual storytelling. But what a twisto, abuse of performers, especially women, used to be expected from directors in pursuit of incredible performances which frequently worked. Story 4. Not dead yet, but it baffles me how nobody seemingly knows that Conor McGregor was convicted for raping a woman so brutally, the tampon had to be surgically removed. Cristiano Ronaldo was accused of rape, but the case didn't go through because the transcript of him admitting it to his lawyers, detailing the brutality of it, was acquired illegally. Both still have a significant following. Story 5. Jerry Lee Lewis married his 13-year-old cousin, and almost everyone remembers him for that other than his music. When he died, fellow musicians were full of nothing but praise for him and conveniently overlooked this as well as his other misdemeanors. Story 6. Dr. Seuss, horrible to his wife. Edit. So, as it turns out, I was wrong and Dr. Seuss wasn't a shitbag to his wife. I linked a post with sources going over this topic, I'm sorry. Story 7. Ronald Reagan. He was a piece of human being, but got away with a lot of it due to his personal celebrity appeal. He obviously knew about Iran-Contra and lied about it, disparaged Nelson Mandela and supported South Africa's apartheid government, ignored the AIDS crisis, was instrumental in the current wealth inequality that we have today by bringing about trickle-down economics, defunded mental health care and education, gave weapons to the Taliban, busted unions, threw out the fairness doctrine, and my personal favorite, sabotaged the Iran hostage negotiations behind the scenes so that he could use it against Carter in the 1980 election. He shouldn't be on Mount Rushmore, he should be under it. Story 8. Bob Barker, lived to 99, beloved game show host who brought lovely memories to millions of television viewers for many decades, also fostered a toxic work environment behind the scenes, very dismissive and demeaning to his female workers, and of course, most of the models known as Barker's beauties all sued him when they left the show. They couldn't keep up and eventually settled, but Holly Hallstrom went the distance. Her legal fight lasted 10 years, she ended up homeless, but then she won and got her payout of several millions. Way to go, Holly. Seems like during his tenure it was the old boys club attitude and the women's staff couldn't fight for their rights or defend themselves, because they were up against Barker and CBS. Story 9. I got permanently banned from the Marvel subreddit because I said Kobe was an alleged rapist and playing basketball then dying in a helicopter crash didn't make him a saint. Edit. For the folks claiming the ban was because it has nothing to do with Marvel, it was in reply to a post of this comic cover featuring Kobe in an Iron Man suit. Story 10. John Lennon, musical talent aside, the way he treated his ex-wife and Julian is appalling, and people let him off far too lightly for the breakup of the band, blaming it all on Yoko Ono. He was a grown man who could think for himself, not that Yoko is any better. She couldn't be bothered to lift a finger or contribute a single cent towards Julian after John's passing. She inherited John's entire estate worth an estimated $800 at the time of his death. $1 million would have meant nothing to her, so she obviously was being needlessly petty and spiteful. On the other hand, Paul looked out for both Julian and his mother. When Cynthia put John's old love letters up for auction because they needed money, Paul bought them and gifted them back to her. He's a class act who deserves his celebrity recognition. Story 11. Steve Jobs. He had a daughter with his high school girlfriend, repeatedly denied paternity despite DNA tests showing otherwise, claimed that he was sterile, which was a lie. That girl lived in poverty while he went on to become incredibly wealthy. He later finally allowed her into his life and according to her was abusive and distant, and she said that he frequently would be manipulative and insult her appearance or hygiene. He was also really temperamental towards his employees, publicly humiliated staff. Close friends even called him self-centered and difficult to work with. Apple worked with Foxconn, which was a Chinese manufacturing partner that is accused of harsh working conditions, long hours, poor wages, etc. That obviously isn't something unique to Apple, but Jobs was dismissive of these concerns. Apple was also part of a wage-fixing scandal, conspiring with other Silicon Valley companies to not poach employees, which suppressed salaries across the industry. He really wasn't a good dude. Apple in general is not a good company, yet there is very little negative press towards him or the company, a lot more praise than criticism. Story 12 Dr. Seuss had a barely concealed extramarital affair while he was married to Helen Palmer, who was struggling with a chronic illness that left her disabled. She killed herself in 1967, and Seuss married his mistress 8 months later. He was also heavily in favor of the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, and drew many political cartoons during the war in which Japanese people were depicted in an incredibly racist, stereotypical manner. Story 13 Alexander Graham Bell tried to outlaw sign language and thought that deaf people shouldn't have their native language, even though his wife was deaf. AGB even today is an oralist deaf organization against any use of sign language. Story 14 I believe it depends on who you talk to, but I'd say Charles Lindbergh. Lucky Lindy was adored for his solo transatlantic flight from New York to Paris in 1927, and the nation mourned the kidnapping and murder of his infant son, Charles Lindbergh Jr. In 1932, kidnapping was designated a federal crime because of this case. However, Lindbergh was a Nazi sympathizer and headed the America First Committee, which was dedicated to keeping the United States out of World War II. He socialized with Nazis during one of his many trips to Germany and received a medal from Hermann Göring, who headed the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. Lindbergh also had a secret family in Germany while he was married to and Moro Lindbergh. He had children with 2 women in Bavaria, Brigitte and Marietta Hesheimer, and with his European secretary, Valeska, he kept these relationships secret from his wife and his children in America. Story 15 Not dead yet, but the director Roman Polanski was convicted of rape and sodomy of a 13-year-old drugged-up girl. He fled before sentencing and has been treated as a genius since. He's even won several awards. Several female actresses who were part of the Me Too movement were called out barely for signing a petition to have his conviction overturned so he could come back to America. Should be dead. Story 16 Marlon Brando was an on-set and people hated working with him, and sad the actress on the set of The Last Tango in Paris by using butter which he had discussed with the director on the day of shooting and did not inform Maria Schneider before to discuss it with her. He also suggested to write his lines on Mariah's rear end instead of memorizing his lines, but it was rejected. Story 17 All the Pioneers of America, Henry Ford, Rockefeller, Edison, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, Vanderbilt, Ray Kroc. Anyone that became successful climbed over a lot of people to get to the top. Story 18 Michael Jackson, what is everyone thinking? He used to pay poor people to sleep with their kids, and everyone said, he has a childlike mind, he isn't doing anything. Story 19 Caroline Flack, she domestically abused her boyfriend by hitting him with a lamp while he slept. She couldn't take the heat of, rightfully, being called an abuser and committed suicide. Her suicide is promoted as a tragedy, while her abuse is swept under the rug. She even has a memorial bench in her hometown. Story 20 Walt Disney built a global empire but also had a history of racism and anti-Semitism that people conveniently forget the moment they walk into Disneyland. Story 21 Literally, St. Patrick and his predecessor, Palladius. Following the standard operational patterns of the era, Cardinal Patrick and his forces committed religious genocide across Ireland at the behest of the then-current Pope Celestine I, converting the island at the point of the sword from paganism to Catholicism, aka driving out the snakes. Using converts to his beliefs to force others to either convert or be killed. Story 22 John Wayne, way after civil rights movement win, he advocated back the other way and was a massive racist. He wanted full Jim Crow stuff back in force. Now people only ever remember him fondly for his bang-average cowboy films. Story 23 Bing Crosby known, along with his wife, for terribly abusing his children. I had a friend whose parents worked as contract background players on the sets, lots and scenes of movies during Hollywood's golden age when she was a little girl. Every once in a while, they would take her with them and she would be in awe of the various stars she saw, including the ones in the films in which her parents worked and appeared. One of them was one of the road pictures with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. Even though her parents usually did not bother those in the main cast, they gave in to their daughter, again, just a little girl maybe 7, 8 or 9 years old, who pleaded to meet Hope and Crosby. They took her to Bob Hope first and introduced her. He pulled her onto his lap and immediately treated her as if she was the most important little girl in the world, asking all the usual questions one would of a little girl: what's your favorite school subject, etc. When he was finished they, and she later remembered very reluctantly, took her over to Bing Crosby. With their voices shaking, they asked him if their daughter could meet him. He looked at them, looked down at her, and back at them, and then asked with an expression as cold as ice, do I have to touch her? Story 24 Albert Einstein, his wife helped him with his work, got no credit. Pablo Picasso took talented female artists under his wing, slept with them and destroyed them. Watson and Crick stole the X-ray diffraction data from Rosalind Franklin for DNA and won a Nobel Prize. Bertolt Brecht stole probably most of his books from his female muses. Story 25 Kobe Bryant, he violently raped a hotel employee, lied about it, had his legal team illegally leak her information everywhere they could, knowing that his fans would go after her. She dropped the charges out of fear for her life, and then once it was impossible to go after him, he came out and admitted to it without an ounce of remorse. He absolutely ruined her life after violently raping her, and then putting a target on her back for his fans to go after, and when he died, people acted like he was a saint, and it was a tragedy. NBA 2K24 even had special editions to honor him, including the Black Mamba edition, a nickname he gave himself to commemorate his rape of that girl. That's right, EA is profiting off a reference to an actual rape, and the fans love it. Story 26. Does Stanley Kubrick count? Like, yeah, he made amazing movies and was a titan of cinema, but he was also practically insane and tortured Shelley Duvall on The Shining and Malcolm McDowell on A Clockwork Orange. Story 27. Dr. Seuss didn't even like children. His first wife Helen Geisel supported him in dropping out of school to focus on his art, then he cheated on her so publicly she killed herself. In her suicide letter she told him it was okay to blame it on her cancer coming back. Married mistress. One of his only wishes was his work never be made into film again. He hated how it turned out the first time. The body wasn't even cold by the time Wife 2 sold the movie rights. Serves him right. As a teacher I grit my teeth through Dr. Seuss Week, edit to add a snippet of her suicide letter. Dear Ted, what has happened to us? I don't know. I feel myself in a spiral going down into a black hole from which there is no escape, no brightness, and loud in my ears from every side I hear, failure, failure, failure. I love you so much, I am too old and enmeshed in everything you do and are, that I cannot conceive of life without you. My going will leave quite a rumor, but you can say I was overworked and overwrought. Your reputation with your friends and fans will not be harmed. Sometimes, think of the fun we had all through the years. Story 28. Michael Jackson. Grooming kids with lavish gifts, isolating them from their parents, tricking them to get drunk on Jesus juice, sharing a bed shower with kids, secretive wedding ceremonies. People just ignore all the flashing red lights. Story 29. Kobe Bryant. I remember how Vosh caught a lot of flack soon after he died for both mentioning that he was a rapist and that he was still a rich, privileged guy. Story 30. Islam's greatest prophet Muhammad. Not only did he marry a 6-year-old and was a well-known abuser, but he personally killed hundreds of people when building the Islamic Caliphate. Story 31. Paul Gauguin pedophile Dante Gabriel Rossetti heavily controlled his wife Lizzie Siddall, who eventually developed mental health issues and committed suicide. Caravaggio murderer Degas, hated anyone Jewish. Francis Bacon predator and perpetrator of D.V. Picasso massive misogynist. Story 32. Wasn't Martin Luther King Jr. a wife beater or something like that? Like, no disrespect to the I Have a Dream guy, but that's kind of move right there. Story 33. Elvis Presley. He was a pedophile who convinced the parents of a 14-year-old girl he met romanced while he was in the army to let her move in with him at Graceland. He'd have her write daily letters to her folks telling them she was fine while taking her on frequent drug-fueled excursions to Vegas. He was 25 when he met her. He eventually married her when she was legally old enough after several years of grooming abuse. People jump out the woodwork to defend him though. I don't get it. Story 34. Pete Rose had a thing for underage girls in the 70s. That guy too. Babe Ruth, horrible drunk and womanizer, got into actual brawls with police and his fame protected him. Story 35. Kobe Bryant. I'm not talking about the rape case at all, I'm just talking in terms of him being a shitty teammate. Seems like everyone that played with him has a story about him being an in practice. Story 36. Probably 90 of celebrities can be used as examples. Most celebrities are awful people, but everyone idolizes them and ignores their bad behavior. We set an extremely low bar for celebrities to be considered good people. Story 37. Literally, Mother Teresa. Made a saint after her death for her work in India, which included trying to convert the native population to Catholicism by tricking them into thinking they were getting medical care, when they were basically kept in concentration camp-like conditions where needles were reused from patient to patient and washed with contaminated water. Teresa believed that it was good that the sick were suffering because it brought them closer to Jesus, and she wasn't so much interested in giving them medical care and healing them as she was just giving them a public place to die, which would in turn get more money for her charities. Only 7 of all of the money raised actually was found to go to her charities, but you better believe when it was her turn to get sick, she flew on a private plane to the USA and got the best medical care available. She was also friends with murderous dictators, corrupt financiers, and told a bunch of Bosnian rape victims that they were the greatest destroyers of life for trying to seek abortions after being forcibly impregnated by their captors during the war. Story 38. Jeffrey Epstein, and anyone who has ever been in his presence, including our current president. If that isn't the most up thing in this world, I don't know what is. Story 39. Oda Nobunaga, the Demon King but also the great unifier of Japan. He killed members of his own family, burned Buddhist monks alive in their temples, etc. Now he is romanticized and lots of video games feature him as a handsome protagonist. Story 40. Ryan Dunn and Paul Walker. People who drink and drive are scumbags. I know I'm in the minority by a long shot, but so many innocent people have their lives taken by drunk drivers and I find them abhorrent. Story 41. Mother Teresa. Literally, she is a literal saint in death, but in life she made the people she cared for suffer without any type of painkillers because she thought suffering as Jesus did would bring you closer to God. Except when she was dying, then she got the best medical treatment available. She also constantly lied to donors about how their money would be spent, because almost none of it was actually spent on medical treatment. Story 42. John McCain divorced his first wife who was disfigured in an accident. I think I read that he did not want to pay her health insurance, so when he ran for president she said that is okay, I will write a tell-all book to pay for the insurance he paid. Story 43. Not dead yet, But Stone Cold Steve Austin is cheered as all when he comes out to this day, but he hit his ex-wife Deborah and another ex-girlfriend about 20 years ago. Story 44. Somehow, even with the knowledge that Elvis Presley groomed Priscilla starting when she was 14 and was extremely controlling to her, people still simp for him and I have no idea why. Story 45. Every new age rapper. These people have multiple homicides on their records. They gun down women and men in cold blood. And people out here saying fly high and rest in peace. I'm an atheist, but I'm pretty sure if I'm wrong in that belief they be going straight to. Story 46. Pretty much most British colonists. Lord Kitchener was the worst of the lot, hailed as a visionary leader, but in doing so did horrendous things to achieve his goal, the most notable of which was his scorched earth policy and the establishment of concentration camps in the Anglo-Boer War. Story 47. Charles Lindbergh. He loved the Germans and said they were right for handling their Jewish problem. He went to Germany and praised Hitler. My dad was a World War II vet and always referred to him as that Nazi. Story 48. People should remember that two things can be true. I'm sure we have all done bad things. Does that mean you should be remembered as a bad person? Martyrs' idols were only human. We can appreciate one thing that someone did while criticizing another. Story 49. Not dead, but Matthew Broderick aka Ferris Bueller, on August 5, 1987, while driving a rented car outside Tempo, Northern Ireland, Broderick crossed into the wrong lane and collided head-on with another car. The driver, Anna Gallagher, 28, and her mother, Margaret Doherty, 63, were both killed instantly. He was fined $175 and his career was unaffected. Story 50. Actual answer is Steve Irwin. People hated how he treated animals for his TV show when he was alive. Even when he died, the consensus was that's what you get for bullying animals. Only some time after his death he somehow became one of the internet saints. Story 51. Jimmy Savile, English record producer, knighted, supplied and molested thousands of young girls to pedophilia in the royal family and pedophilia circles in England. Story 52. Mother Teresa. The way she treated the sick and the poor was atrocious and abusive. While her ministries received millions in donations, they didn't provide adequate nutrition or medication to those in their care. Mother Teresa preached that the people should suffer like Christ, but when she was sick later in life, she insisted on receiving all the best care and pain meds that she denied those in need. Story 53. Bobby Hull, legendary Chicago Blackhawks and Winnipeg Jets winger, told a Soviet magazine that Hitler had some good ideas. He just went a little bit too far. Which raises the question, how many cities of your neighbors are you permitted to flatten before you've crossed the too far line? How many industrialized, genocidal extermination plants are you allowed to build before you're a wee bit out of line, mate? It's been estimated that Germany had over 40,000 extermination camps, from very large ones to quite small ones. Let's say it had 95% fewer extermination camps. Sounds pretty good. I gave 95% more money to charity last year, but that's still 2,000 camps set up with the express purpose of exterminating Jews, gays, Romani, journalists, labor unionists, resistance fighters, twins, and the developmentally and physically disabled. Still feels quite bad to me, at least. My dad spent some nights sheltering in the Glasgow subway system because Hitler was dropping bombs on him and he was just a wee baby, and Glasgow got off way lighter than London and Coventry. Fuck sake. Bobby Hull, have another liter of Merlot. Oh, and he enjoyed flying into alcoholic rages and beating up the women in his life.